Good morning. It's morning here in Ray County. I'm going to talk to you about the myth of speed and the myth of our need for speed, which is literally a myth, and it's such a widely believed and accepted myth that it's one of the big things that keeps us from being able to take any meaningful action about climate change. All, without exception, of the accepted uh, cures or fixes for climate change are based on developing new technologies to enable us to maintain our current speeds at all things um, without emitting carbon. In the first place, that is known to be impossible. Nobody tells you that. They talk about the ways to solve the ones that are theoretically at least solvable, such as generating electricity by what's called renewable means, solar panels or wind generators or other things, making cars that run then on that electricity that we generated in renewable ways. Um, but it is a fact, and I don't care who you ask, that many of the major emitting carbon sources are things we don't know how to alleviate with other technology. We can't alleviate jet planes. All that talk about, look, they built a solar plane. That's completely fiction. I mean, look, I can build a plane that's powered on rubber bands. I've played with them all my life. I would get another one and enjoy it, no doubt. It's a matter of scale. You can power a plane on solar panels and batteries, and you can power a plane on rubber bands, or you can fly 500 people across the Pacific Ocean, but those things are not related. Okay, the fact that you can make a plane fly on rubber bands or on solar panels does not in any way imply a path to scale that up to where you can take that technology and fly it across. There's 100,000 jet flights a day. Anybody who's talking to you about solving global warming, climate change, who's not talking about jet planes is lying to you. I mean, what? They're not lying to you. I say that's a harsh term. But they are misleading you. That technology doesn't exist. It does not exist, and it's never going to exist because it violates the laws of thermodynamics, and the laws of thermodynamics are absolute. They cannot be reasoned with, they cannot be talked with, they cannot be done away with. The same thing applies with the ships that we transport freight across oceans with. Those ships, at that volume, at that size, at that speed, cannot be powered with any technology known to man except diesel fuel or nuclear fission. And if we power freighters with nuclear fission, then you're talking about taking the absolute dregs of global society, which sailors have always been and still are, and turning them loose in the ocean with nuclear reactors and letting them sail those nuclear reactors into all the major cities of the world. And you're assuming that nothing's ever going to go wrong. It's not. I don't buy it. I mean, if anybody wants to go that way, that's fine. But I don't think it'll work. I think sooner or later somebody will sail one of them into L.A. and I don't care. They don't have to turn it into an atomic bomb. All they got to do is wrap the reactor in C4 and blow it up, and you can kill everything west of the Rockies. That's an exaggeration, but you can pretty much kill everybody in L.A. So that technology doesn't exist. And the reason that we agree that that's the solution is because we feel that we have this need for speed. And as recently as yesterday, when I was talking about slowing down and biologically powered, animal powered, human powered speed sources, someone said to me on Twitter, how do you plan to feed 8 billion people without fossil fuels, or do you just admit it's impossible? Well, I don't admit it's impossible. I don't even think it's harder. I don't think fossil fuels are doing anything to contribute to feeding the 7.5 or 8 billion people on Earth today. It is known how the yields of various crops got larger since World War II. One of the main driving forces to larger yields was more fixed nitrogen. During World War II, gunpowder is made out of nitrogen, largely fixed nitrogen. And so to make all the bombs and all the bullets of World War II, the whole developed world, everybody who was running the major armies in World War II, developed new technology and large-scale facilities for fixing nitrogen in usable forms. And after the war, they put that nitrogen fixing technology to work fixing nitrogen for farm fertilizer. It is known, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus are the big three nutrients that we replace in extractively farmed ground to keep it producing. And a lot of the yield increases came directly from the increased nitrogen fixation. That nitrogen fixation is driven by fossil fuels. So I guess I would have to grant that in that way, fossil fuels have contributed to that path of yield increase. Another path of yield increase has been done with old-fashioned plant breeding, hybrids, which yield larger amounts than the old open pollinated corns and soybeans did. So that's one of them. And the old-fashioned plant breeding, of course, has nothing to do with fossil fuels. Gregor Mendel started that for you, and he didn't get to work on a motorcycle. The other increases in yields have been wrapped around various genetic engineering and poison combinations. You poison everything, and then you genetically engineer a crop to grow in that poison, and it has no competitors, and so it yields more highly. So there's where your higher yields came from. Now, as to whether we need these higher yields to feed the 8 billion people, according to the IPCC in their report that they put out in August of 2019, the current food system of the world is providing an outcome stream under which roughly 2 billion people are overfed or obese. I'm one of those 2 billion. I'm working my way down from obese to just overfed, but I'm overweight. I'm clearly overweight. I'm at least 25 pounds overweight still, and I've lost 15 recently. That's our current food system is producing that. About 875,000, I can't remember the exact number, are either undernourished or on the edge of starvation. So we got 7.5 billion people. We got 2 7/8 billion who are experiencing adverse health conditions from living on today's food system. That's slightly over 1 out of 3 humans on Earth is experiencing adverse health conditions from our current food system. So I would say that justifying our current food system based on it enables us to feed 8 billion people is pretty weak. In fact, very weak. You know, in the second place, our current production amounts here in the U.S. You know, as I'm speaking today, our major desperation is that we don't have the Chinese quit buying our soybeans. Okay, and our yields are so vast that our per unit price value is so low that our farmers can't live, can't pay their bills, can't keep their farms, can't buy their fossil fuels, can't buy their fertilizers without a market that's on the other side of the world. And the weirder thing is that China ships almost as many soybeans back to us as we ship to them. So really, all we're doing is we're just running this stuff around. You know, they've been putting corn in our cars now for, I don't know how long, 20 years, 30 years? Ethanol, you know, you go buy gas, buy fuel at any gas station. It's hard to find a gas pump that isn't at least giving you 10% ethanol. And this past year, they increased the legally mandated amount of ethanol to 15%. And that was in order to find markets for our corn. It had no other purpose. That law existed exclusively to find markets for our corn. So we can't feed all these people without these high energies is false on the face of it. The second thing that's false about it is that our large-scale agriculture, of which I have several videos on here, you can just do a little look around and see videos about our large-scale agriculture up close, where you can actually see the fields. I take you out and I walk you through the fields and I show you what's there, so you can see it with your own eyes and you can form your own conclusions. There's nobody who even claims that the speed of equipment or the scale of the fields is resulting in an improvement in yields. The only efficiency, the only claimed efficiency for our large-scale agriculture is per man hour, per person hour, if you wish to be a little more gracious about it. But of course the fact is that 99.999, I don't have any idea what the real number is, pretty much all the guys out there are guys. So we're talking man hours, okay? Now, the person himself works pretty much a full-time job. I have a large-scale farmer who lives right across the road from me in a regular commercial farm. And I watch what he does. And the things he does are he maintains his machinery, which he has, you know, I mean, his combine alone cost him over $100,000, and that wasn't even new. He's got his big tractors, and he's got his spray buggy, and he's got, you know, all that stuff. And he works on that. He maintains that and keeps it running. And he drives it out in his fields. And so he works a full-time job, just like anybody else works a full-time job. And he personally does not gain any benefit from the scale of his work. What he gains benefit from is that he's able to earn a livelihood with his work. And if he were able to earn a livelihood working a full-time job on 80 acres, he would be just as well off. He would be just as happy. He would be just as productive. The neighborhood itself would not be as lonely. The local town would not be as desperate for jobs, because it's known that the reason all the small towns went broke is because all the farmers went broke, and all the big farmers bought the small farmers, and the bigger farmers bought the big farmers, and the biggest farmers bought the big farmers. And every few years, and we're doing it again now. This deal we're doing now with the trade war. Every few years, the government establishes some new policy. And since farming is strictly about producing cash money, the new policy just takes the bottom 20% economically and just pushes them out of business. And then all their land becomes available, and the remaining 80% of what used to be all the farmers, the biggest and richest of those buy up all the other 20% farms, and now your average farm size is larger. And then we sit on that for a few years, and then we do it again. And you can look back in history, I'm talking, since the 70s, for instance. And you can see these recurrent cycles. Periodically they just peel off the bottom 20% of all the farmers and say, you're done, move to the city. You can't live in the country anymore. You can't own any land anymore. You can't farm anymore. You can't be self-employed anymore. Beat it. The high energy that we're putting into our food system is in no way contributing to feeding the world. The per acre yields are high. They're higher than we need. They're higher than we can earn a living at. And the race becomes to be the guy who buys the newer, bigger, faster tractor and the neighbor's farm on the same day, so that you can farm the extra land and get the same old per acre yield and stay open, because you have more total soybeans to sell. And if China buys them, you're in Fat City, and if they don't, you have a problem. And maybe you can get the federal government to give you some money. The whole myth that our speed in any way feeds us. There's no place on this planet where humans live where food doesn't grow. In fact, humanity should not really make a major trade item out of staple foods like soybeans or corn. Those are staples. That is to say, they can store all year. You can get a big yield once a year. You can go out and eat off that yield all year. There's no justification whatsoever for staple foods to be shipped around the world in trade. We should trade things which we cannot produce locally. The original trade, you got somebody who lives in the mountains where the volcanoes were, and he's got obsidian, and he can go down into the valleys, and this stuff makes really sharp knives, and he can trade that to somebody who's got long straight sticks that make really good arrows. You trade for things that you can't produce where you are. You don't ship corn one way and soybeans the other way and topsoil both ways. I mean, you can, but the purpose of that's just to make money. It's not to actually feed anybody. And our money-centered economy is a separate issue I'm not going to talk about right now, but it's another problem. But we could feed everyone without anyone having a tractor. Now, it would take more people, because right now, if all the tractors disappeared tomorrow and no new people came out into the countryside, and there remained, these 5,000 acre fields, and a guy's got 2 horses and a 5,000 acre field, well, he can't plow his whole 5,000 acre field in a year if he works every day. So obviously, within our system, we must have the energy to produce the food, because we've gotten rid of the other resources which produced it. But given that an individual farmer in almost any arable area can produce more food than her family can eat, That means every individual farmer can produce a surplus. So there can be a farmer and there can be somebody who runs a store, a baker. And the farmer can sell her surplus and the baker can buy it and turn it into bread and sell it back to the farmer. So you have a functioning money economy. But by the nature of arithmetic, the more humans there are, the more human hours are available to produce food. So you will never reach the place where you have to have fossil fuels to produce food, because all fossil fuels save you is man hours. And the man hour pool available to draw from increases with the population. So we could feed all the peoples of the world in a walking pace agricultural system, but we would have to redevelop the system. It's known how it works. It's known that it still works. It is known that the Amish people in America and a vast majority of all the farmers in Africa are using animal-powered traction today. And so those systems work. The technology is available. We don't have enough animals now because we have wasted those lives and we have wasted that resource so that we could build more mechanical resource. So it would take some time to breed enough animals. Donkeys, horses, and cattle are your big three power animals. It would take some time to breed enough animals to rebuild an animal-powered agriculture that produced enough surpluses to feed all the people in the world. It would take a lot more animals. It would take a lot of the people who live in cities moving to the country. Not all of them. We're not talking about subsistence agriculture here. We're talking about production agriculture at a walking speed, at the speed of life. And so the imbalance of literally billions upon billions of people in cities and only a few million on the countryside worldwide would have to change. But the billions of people in cities, many of them are not that happy there. Now, as far as the people to get to do the work, just take as one example, take America's coal miners. The recommended solution to the fact that we're not burning much coal anymore, and that what coal we are burning we're extracting almost exclusively with machines, so we don't need human miners anymore. The recommended solution is that we will educate those people. But the jobs that we're going to educate them for don't currently exist. You know, the economy doesn't need another 100,000 programmers. But we're going to educate them as coders anyway, because if we do that, then the per unit value of a coder will go down and we can pay all our coders less money. We don't need to educate those people to operate computers. These are people who have strong bodies and who have an instinctive grasp of how to apply tools to resources to attain an objective. That's what they've been doing in the mines. They've been applying tools to resources to attain an objective. And they don't need to be re-educated for that. They already have that. That's their native skill. And instead of devaluing their native skill, we need to use it to produce things that we're currently producing with fossil fuels. We can't continue to do all this fossil fuel work. We have the people, we have the knowledge, we know how to breed the animals. We know everything we need to do to know to really literally stop emitting carbon instead of just talking about it. And the myth that our speed is necessary for our survival will not withstand any degree of analysis. It's just false. We could live fine without going so fast. That's all for now.